Then gotta get the duo code. All right, here's my GitHub handle. Welcome everyone. So today I'm just going to be working through the Odin Project. And it's trying to connect to Windows subsystem for Linux, but for some reason it's not working. I don't want that though. I just want to get started on coding. There it is. That folder. All right, I trust the authors. So, for those of you who don't know, the Odin Project is this excellent resource. It's one of those what I wish I had when I was learning resources. And it's kind of a free computer science education for those of us who can't attend an intensive coding school. And it's project-based, and it's very high quality. I believe in education being free and accessible, something I really can get behind, and you learn best by building, and motivation is fueled by working with others. And open source is best. And look at this, almost 1 million learners. 5,000 people have contributed to this, and it's founded in 2013. So give it a look, theodinproject.com. So I'm going to resume from kind of where I've been working from. So I went through the prerequisites, the introduction, the basics of Git, which is a version control system. What is Git? It is a distributed version control system. Let's make that a little smaller. Give me a second, my little cat wants some attention. See a camera? Want to see a camera? Look at him. He's a ragdoll. Come on. Look. He's a little chunky monkey. Anyway, let's get back to the topic at hand here. So there's the HTML foundations, which takes you through an introduction of what hypertext markup language is HTML, and cascading style sheets, or CSS. And oh, he wants attention. Talks through kind of the boilerplate code and how to work with text, what lists are, how to do links and images, and then how to commit all that to GitHub. And then you have a project here, and then moving on to CSS here. This is where I'm at currently. So I've actually worked on a little bit of this, but I did it a few months ago, but I'm trying to recall all that information. So I'm going to start here again and go through CSS foundations, and we can do that together, guys. So, introduction here. We learned HTML that determines how a web page is structured. And the next step is to make that structure look good. So that's where CSS comes in. And yeah, that's that. So we'll add CSS styles to HTML. Let's hit this. Understand how to use the class and ID attributes. So for every tag, you can assign it a class or a specific identification. And you can also add styles to those classes, IDs, etc., using these things called selectors. And then kind of walks you through what the cascade is doing on a programmatic level. I mean, maybe not necessarily programmatic level, but definitely on a little deeper understanding is what they're going to give us. So At the most basic level, CSS is made up of various rules, and they're made up of a selector and a semicolon separated list of declarations, and each of those declarations is a property value pair. So there's a property, and then you give it a value. So there's that picture here that really breaks it down. So div.bold-text is a selector, the property is the font weight, value of 700. I'm not even sure what div.bold-text is out of this point, but we'll find out. I got a little note here. Div is a basic HTML element, and it's just an empty container, and it's just telling us here to use other tags like the first header or paragraph for specific content, and then we'll learn later on that there are other cases where you will need a div, and the exercises here are going to use divs for simplicity. And then later on, they're going to go into more depth about what's appropriate use of the various HTML elements. And so selectors. These are just the HTML elements to which we're going to apply the cascading style sheets rules. And so we're selecting for those elements and then applying the styles to them. Sorry if I'm being a little redundant here, but gotta learn somehow, right? Right, universal selector. So this wildcard here, or the star, is the universal selector. So for all the elements in our index.html, so let me pull up an index.html here. I think, yeah, HTML. No, that's another project I was working on. Let's just go ahead and make a new directory. So using Control plus tilde, I open up my terminal. Useful little shortcut for VS Code. And I'm going to type in make directory CSS YouTube. And I'm going to go into there using CD. Of course, nothing's in there, but a force of habit, I put ls in there. So I'm going to code index.html to open up a new index.html. And you can use this thing called an emit abbreviation, where you just put an exclamation point, and all this code here is what's going to automatically be brought up. So this is just the basic boilerplate. You got, letting the browser know that it's an HTML document, the language. We're going to use the UTF-8 charset. I'm not actually sure exactly what HTTP equivalent is, but here we can find out, maybe. Well, let's not get down to that rabbit hole. Alright, so we'll just title this YouTube CSS, the Odin Project. Alright, so I like a little space between my head and my body. So in the body here, we're going to do all this stuff. Alright, so let's just make some placeholder text. So I'll make a paragraph and put in lorem ipsum. Oh, maybe that's an abbreviation. Yeah, cool. I didn't know that existed, but yeah, now we know. I'm gonna make a little more space here. So pretty much that typing lorem out in VS Code will give you random generated text. And then I'm gonna put a title or a header here. Lorem. Go down. Yeah, another paragraph in there, and lorem, and go down, make another header. Images. We'll make some images, and we'll put a div in there. And in that, we will put image. And so image is one of those. Image equals. And then we're just going to pick a random image. Oh, I like this one. But this duck was cute. Yeah, we'll put the link in here. And let's see. Let's see what the website looks like. So just gotta type open. Oh, I'm on my MacBook here, so that might not work. Nope. Maybe I need the live server extension. That's kind of what I'm used to. I don't feel like navigating to this. This is a cool extension. Yeah, go live. Just click that, allow the access, and find the folder. So here it is. Why is that image not working? Strange. Very strange, team. All right, when in doubt, Google. Image source HTML. The HTML image tag. I like W3 schools. They have good quality information here. Oh, I think maybe I need alt text. Alt equals cute dog. And then we'll put with. I've been taught it's good practice to just do set the dimensions so that the space is taken up. Let's make it a square. Alright, so save that, and then let me do this. Huh. Well, why can't we get the image? Maybe it's because the link is messed up. Yeah, I wish I could figure out a way to just replace this link. Maybe if I hover. Nope. Symbol? Nope. Let's do this. Copy and paste. And we'll do that. And for whatever reason, this isn't working. Let's see if I can just go to my folder, because I really want to see this image work. That is strange. Image. Oh, maybe. Well, linking to it should work. Huh. Maybe. All right. For whatever reason, it needed to actually be the image link itself. All right. Now that we got that taken care of, let's move on. So we've got our paragraph, our header one here, got two paragraphs, and then we have a second header, and this cute doggo. So moving on, we're gonna actually go to our terminal again and type in make directory styles, and we'll go into styles, code up a CSS styles.css, and we're going to make that universal selector, just following the code here, and we'll pick up blue violet. That's a good color, and put that semicolon there. Let's see what that does. Oh, I think I gotta link it though. Well, let's just move through this here. Meeting. Will I? Play? Play with you a little bit. Type selectors. This is just saying that it will select all elements of the given element type. So you can do a type selector. So this is everything. And then this is just a specific type. So we can say we just want the dividends, or the divs. Dividends. We can type div, color, marine. Let's see what that does. Well, we can't see quite yet, but we'll have, now that since we have all this here, we can, we have multiple types, so we can try and play with those a little bit. Okay, so this is the HTML, and this is just the style. So clearly we're only targeting the div, so only hello world, hello again, and okay bye would be in the color of white. And then we can also do classes. So classes are an attribute we place on an HTML element, so we can just say class equals big heading. Well, let's not make it complicating. Big heading. Okay. And we can put that class, big heading, as one of our styles. So dot. So I guess the dot signifies that it is a class selector. So dot big heading. Well, maybe I can't put a space in there, so I'm gonna have to put a dash in there. Oh, and that's not proper style, team. Color. Right. That's a period immediately followed by the case-sensitive value of the class attribute. And classes aren't required to be unique, so you can use the same class on as many elements as you want in HTML. So I can have big heading for all my headings except for H6. And you can also add multiple classes to a single HTML element. So I can put a space in there and that'll make it leading heading. Let's do that. Leading heading. And then we'll make dot leading heading. Oh, this is telling me something's wrong there. Leading heading, color, antique white. It'll be interesting to see which one. I'm going to guess that's going to be the leading heading because that's the one that was last applied. That's last in the CSS. Let's try and see if I apply it first, if it big heading, since it's being called after that, it would apply. It would overwrite leading heading style. We'll see. So ID selectors. So you can give a HTML class an ID equals first paragraph. Okay. 10 minutes. All right. And now we can apply that. So you put a hashtag instead of a period. And the hashtag signifies that it's an ID. So, I already forgot. First paragraph. And color. Oh, we're just kind of a mismatch of colors here. Well, that's a little too close to antique white. Let's, forest green. Sounds good to me. So yeah, it's saying here we use a hashtag immediately followed by a case-sensitive value of the ID attribute. And people overuse the ID attribute when you don't necessarily need to, when classes are going to be fine. And you should use it sparingly. And classes, you can have many classes attached to one HTML element, while in IDs, you can only have one ID. All right, grouping. What if we have two groups of elements that share some of their style declarations? What does that mean? Oh, okay. So if multiple of these selectors have the same kind of properties, we can group them together. So you can put a comma in here, and then go to the next one, and they'll all have these properties. Mm-hmm. Okay. Chaining selectors. So we can chain them as a list without any separation. Okay. You just want to hang on with that. Oh, and he's gone. Okay. Chaining selector. Oh, okay. So this is like a parent-child relationship. If we have this div here, and then one of the child divs have this class of subsection header, and then this paragraph class with subsection preview, we can do dot subsection dot header. Huh, maybe I'm wrong here. We have two elements. Oh, okay, so you can do dot subsection dot header. And that will select any element that has both the subsection and header classes. Well, I thought I couldn't do a space, so that's confusing me. Oh, because it has multiple classes, so subsection, then header. So it has to have both these. I am not feeling smart, team. But it's 11:06 p.m., so I have an excuse. And it literally just said, now notice how there isn't any space between the dot subsection and dot header class selectors. It doesn't work for chaining more than one type of selector. Well, more than one type selector. You can chain it with an ID by just putting a hashtag in there with a pound symbol. So in general, you can't chain more than one type selector since an element can't be two different types at once. Chaining two selectors like div and p would give us the selector div p, which wouldn't work since the selector would try to find a literal div p element. So descendant combinators. So there's 4 types of combinators in total. And right now we're only going to learn about the descendant combinator, which is represented by a single space between the selectors. And it causes the elements that match the last selector to be selected if they have an ancestor that matches the previous selector. So something like .ancestor.child would select an element with the class child if it has an ancestor with the class ancestor. So here's that code here. So we have this div with the class ancestor. So A, B, C. Ancestor, so contents has this ancestor parent, and this class contents doesn't have an ancestor at all. So if we do .ancestor.contents, well, we're going to select only C and B because they both have an ancestor of ancestor. So B and C would be selected, but D wouldn't. So there's no limit to how many combinators you can add to a rule. So .1, 2, 3, 4 would be totally valid. Probably want to avoid that level of nesting though. That gets pretty confusing. And I guess we're going to learn about this issue of specificity. So properties to get started with. There's a lot of properties we're going to be using all the time. Color, background color. So color is the text color, background color, obviously the background color. And so there's 3 types of values that you can assign for color: hex, RGB, and HSL, which is hue, saturation, and luminance. So that's just like if you've used the Photoshop program before, you can customize the colors. They look like this form. That's hex, RGB. You select 255, 255, 255. I think you get black. And then HSL, percentages, I guess. And you can have this quick little link here, which shows all the legal color values. But if you noticed when I was typing here, you can click this little box, or you can scroll over it, and then you can actually select colors. And I guess it defaults to RGB. Well, I'm not sure exactly what the format's called, but yeah, you can select like that. All right, typography basics and text lining. So font family, you can provide a list of fonts that you'd like to use. And so you can create a long list and it'll default back if the font family is not available to the browser that someone's using to view your website. Font size, of course, is font size. Font weight affects the boldness or the weightiness of the text. And I guess 700 is bold. And I'm sure a lot of this we're just going to apply through practice. In text align, lines text horizontally within an element, like center, right, left, etc. Image height and width. We can also define the height and width of elements. Okay, so let's say my div, I want it to be height. I'll make it auto, but I want the width to be 1,000 pixels. That's big. So I guess it works off of a proportional value, so it depends on the original size of the photo that you provided. So since height is auto, it will adjust automatically. Alright, so it's best to include both of these properties for image elements, even if you don't plan on adjusting the values. Because if an image takes longer to load than the rest of the page contents, the image will not take up any space on the page at first, and then it will cause a big shift on the other page contents once it does load in. Okay, that makes sense. Explicitly stating a height and width prevents this from happening, as the space is reserved. Okay, so you're literally boxing out that element and making sure that the space that it needs is available so that when all the other elements start populating, it's not a drastic shift. So like you have this tiny little image, but it's really like this big, and then you have all your contents around it, and if you didn't tell the browser that's this big, then it'll be that little big, and then the contents will populate, but then like once this pops up, it'll be, and then the stuff maybe shifts down or to the sides or up. And it just kind of confuses things. You know, when you load up a Facebook and then all the feed populates, it looks a little wonky if the ratios aren't right. And then you maybe have to scroll up or down a little bit to get to like where you were. Like, you know, when you scroll to the bottom of your Facebook feed and it just suddenly populates like the next 25 posts, and then suddenly you're left scrolling. Like if you were rapidly scrolling down, you might go to the way bottom of it because the entire 25 posts just populated all at once. That's kind of what they're talking about here. Maybe a little too much detail, but it's good to know, especially if we're going to be the ones building these kind of websites. The cascade of CSS. Okay, so if we have rules which conflict with one another and we end up with an unexpected results, and we want certain paragraphs to be blue, but they're red, you know, it can be frustrating. And CSS is a program. Programs only do what you tell them to do. So if there's an error, it's your fault. And one exception to this is the default styles that are provided by a browser. So browsers have default styles that they'll apply to your HTML in the absence of information from you. Alright, so the cascade is what determines which rules will actually ultimately get applied to our HTML. And so there's some rules. There's, let's just take a look here. There's specificity, inheritance, rule order. Okay, so there's 3 rules. And specificity. So this is the hierarchy of specificity. So we're only going to be focusing on ID, class, and type. And so conflicting declarations targeting an element need some sort of tiebreaker. And so an ID selector is always going to be any number of class selectors, and a class selector is going to be any number of type selectors. So, if you have this div targeting all the divs, but then we have a div with the class leading heading, well, of course, this color is going to take over, then aquamarine. And then if we had a chained selector dot leading heading, well, maybe chaining, that's the descendants. No. That would just be having both of them. So if one had both, then that would be even more specific, I think. All right. On here. Oh my gosh, we're just so persistent. Okay, so here's some examples. We have this div with the class main, another div as a child. So, oh god. And then we have these rules here, subsection, and dot main, dot list. Oh, this is an interesting thing here. I think it's going to be dot main, dot list. Rule 2 is more specific because it uses more class selectors. So the color red declaration would take precedence. And if we had an ID in here, we gave it an ID, then that would take even more precedence over these. So any number of class selectors is going to be beat by an ID. All right, so let's, right here, we're going to go over ID. So we have class main, class list, ID subsection, and then we're going to give this subsection blue. So rule 1 is probably going to overtake dot main, dot list, because this is just a list of, this is the descendant combinator, which is based off of classes. So despite rule 2 having more class selectors than ID selectors, rule 1 is more specific, of course, because ID beats class. And final example. All right, so we have class main, class list, ID subsection, okay? And then we have rule 1, rule 2. So maybe rule 2 is going to win out. That's my guess because it's got 3 here, even though they're both targeting the ID of subsection. Yeah. So it turns out rule 2 has higher specificity because it's got 2 class selectors, while rule 1 only has 1. And it's good to point out here that the background color is unique to .list subsection, so that would apply. The background color would still apply to this div, but since the conflict here is over the color red and blue, well, it's going to take the one with more specificity. All right, so there's symbols: plus sign, tilde, triangle, right, or was that greater than, less than, greater than symbol, and an empty space. The symbols themselves don't add any specificity in and of themselves. Or where is that even at? Oh, okay. So this uses no space, while this does. So this is a descendant combinator. This is a chaining selector. Okay, both rules have 2 classes, and the combinator symbol itself doesn't add. Sorry for going up and down so much, team. Alright, this is just a lot of the same. Inheritance. So it refers to certain CSS properties that, when applied to an element, are inherited by that element's descendants, even if we don't explicitly write a rule for those descendants, okay? So there's certain properties, typography is mentioned here, which are usually inherited. Most other properties aren't. So the exception to this is when directly targeting an element, as this always beats inheritance. Okay, so inheritance is less than directly targeting an element. Okay, so we have a div with an ID of parent and a class of child. And we're going to apply a rule to parent and to the class child. Despite the parent element having a higher specificity with an ID, the child element has the color blue style applied to it, since that declaration targets it specifically, while the color red from the parent is only inherited. Oh. So if we applied the color red to this div, we're going to get red text in its child elements unless we specifically target those. And the final factor is whichever rule was last defined. Okay. It's based off of the styles.css, whatever one was last. So this, remember this leading heading and the big heading? The leading heading is going to take precedence. And that's the tiebreaker. So this H1 here is going to take the color red. And how do we add the CSS to our HTML? Okay, so external CSS is the most common method, so that involves making a directive with styles and then putting a styles.css in there. And then we're going to link it inside the HTML's opening and closing head tags with a link element. Okay, so we're going to put link here. I'm just going to copy and paste that. So on the heading, all right, href equals. So this isn't actually the this is the actual link, and it's a relative link. This dot means the current directory. And then this is the folder, and then we're going to target that document. Okay, so now stuff should work. All right, and there it works. So of course, as we predicted, because .big heading was declared last, this is the color that's going to take over, even though it has both of them. And leading heading appears second in the list. It's based off of the CSS document itself. Let's make an image. Let's put it on height auto width. It's not that. Actually, I don't know what that means, but let's find out. Ah, there it is. So I think it takes the width of the actual image itself and then adjusts the height automatically. So if that's the max content, then this is the actual image. Let's hit 500. Let's see what happens there. I think it just blows it up. 10,000! It's over 10,000! I think it's a little too much. Man, pixel. Gotta say pixels. Whoa. Look at that goober. Okay. So we did that link element inside the head. So here, head. And then the H reference is it specifies the URL of the linked resource. And it can be absolute or relative. What does the URL even stand for? Uniform Resource Locator. So it's the resource. Yeah, also, I wonder what href stands for. Hypertext reference. Indicates the destination of the hyperlink. Okay. Relationship, so the link, I guess there's different types. And this is just saying that we have a style sheet available. It specifies the relationship between the HTML file and the linked file. It says that, hey, this is the style sheet, guys. Okay, this is just going over everything that we went through here. Okay, so a couple pros and cons. It keeps our HTML and CSS separated, which results in the HTML file being smaller and making things look cleaner. This looks a lot more clean than putting all this junk at the bottom or top. And we only need to edit the CSS in one place, which is especially handy for websites with many pages that are all similar styles. All right, internal CSS. This is adding the CSS within the HTML file itself instead of creating a completely separate file. All right, so that's just putting it in this HTML document itself. And I guess you have to make a style tag within the head. So imagine this link. Imagine when you make this self-closing tag here that you're just copy and pasting all this into here, but then putting it in a style. That's it. And then inline CSS, I guess, is a possibility where you can literally just style it within the tag itself. And generally isn't recommended. It can quickly become pretty messy once you start adding a lot of declarations to a single element. If you want many elements with the same style, you'd have to copy and paste a lot. That's a lot of, we're coders here, guys. We don't want a lot of repetition and bloat, just unnecessarily. Keeping things separated really helps. Any inline CSS will override the other two methods. Okay, so even higher specificity than the tiebreaker itself is inline CSS, which would be directly targeting this and saying style. Style equals that color bisque. And look, even though there's a conflict here, which was overtaken by this being declared last, this is declared last. Alright, so assignments here. We're going to go to our CSS exercises repository. Okay. Read the README and do the exercises in the foundations directory in the order that they're listed, starting with the 01 -css methods. So there's 6. And then we're going to clean up our recipe pages. And styling's up to you. Do what you want to do. Play around with the various properties, get a feel for what they do, and don't worry about making it look good. Just experiment, practice, get the repetition in. You want to write CSS. You don't have to show it off on your resume. So go crazy right now. And Custom fonts. We can look at CSS fonts for a list of generic font families, and then CSS web safe fonts. So I guess this is a list of fonts which are web safe. I like Garamond. I'm a big Garamond fan. It's nice and round. Times New Roman is just so bleh. It's very outdated to me. It's also it's just a lot of unnecessary. Like let's look at Times New Roman versus Garamond. And okay, so Garamond. Oh, I'm mistaking Garamond. That's not the font I was thinking of. Well, it's not any of them. What the heck? Oh, literally have them here. I like Trebuchet MS or Verdana because these clean lines. There's no little flourishes. Like for example here, the L it kind of tilts upright, and I think it takes a lot of visual effort to kind of process that that's the word. It's more so than this clean L here. You just know it's an L, right? It's not an L with a flourish. A little thing. It's not a huge deal, but for me it is. Alright, knowledge check. So these are some questions that we should review and go over to kind of reinforce our understanding and tie things together. And then resources. So at the end so this is what a typical lesson looks like in the Odin Project, where you get your assignment, and then you have a knowledge check, and then you have resources which you can utilize to enhance your understanding and dive deep into any particular thing that you were curious about. Of course, you can Google, but these are curated by people that do this for a living and know what they're talking about. And then that gives you kind of a plug, like why should you read this? So I really like that about this course. It's very high quality. So with that, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope that you took something away from this. I know I'm not the greatest presenter, especially because I'm learning this alongside with you guys, but maybe my speaking helps you to get through the material and maybe clear up some misunderstandings. But I do think that, I mean, if you just read through this, the quality of the explanations are sufficient for you to get through this.